Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The aliens were certain of victory, until Earth turned their fleet to dust. They came without a warning, no declaration, no signal, not even a threat. Just an eerie silence broken by the sudden appearance of ships blotting out the sky over every major city on Earth. Colossal things, floating without wings, cast shadows that turned day into dusk. People stopped on highways, children stared out of classroom windows, and soldiers in bases across the world froze at the sight. For the first few minutes, everyone thought it was a dream or maybe a hoax. But when the first plasma blast hit New York City, nobody doubted it anymore. The Ikari didn't ask for surrender. They didn't bother with diplomacy. To them, we were insects, primitive, slow, and unworthy of existing on what they now claimed as Sector 93A, our planet, our home. They called it a reclamation, like Earth had always belonged to them and we were just squatting here in ignorance. We weren't even worth enslaving. They wanted us wiped. In less than 2 days, they destroyed most of our satellites, crippled our comm systems, and left half the planet blind. The UN collapsed into chaos. The world's militaries were trying to fight with bullets and jets against ships that shrugged off missiles like they were mosquito bites. Cities burned. Families hid underground, hoping the monsters in the sky would miss them, hoping God was still watching. But Earth wasn't done. Humanity doesn't go down like that. It started in a bunker deep under the Rockies, NORAD's old home, long thought obsolete. What was left of Earth's leaders huddled in fear and panic, voices raised in arguments, some already calling for surrender if the Ikari would even allow it. But then a voice cut through the noise. General Samuel Briggs, retired 5 years prior, legendary in some circles, hated in others, known for his bluntness, his stubbornness, and his obsession with the unconventional. He stood tall in that room as if he weren't afraid of death at all. And maybe he wasn't. "I told you they'd come," he said, eyes scanning the frightened crowd. "And you laughed, you all laughed, now nobody laughed." Briggs didn't wait for permission. He took over what was left of Global Defense Command and pulled a handful of engineers, scientists, and hackers from every corner of the underground shelters. Not the polished officers, not the ones with medals. The misfits, the mad ones, the kind of people who thought outside the box because the box had just been vaporized. They called it Project Scythe. No big armies, no fleets of ships, just a collection of ideas Earth had never dared to try because they were too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too insane. Things banned by international law, weapons still in theoretical stages, devices that bent physics until it screamed. While the world mourned, while the skis rained blue fire, Briggs and his team built hell. The first counterstrike came 6 days after the initial attack. Ikari ships hovered over the African Rift Valley, draining geothermal energy to power their expansion. They didn't even bother shielding. What could these savages possibly do? But when the Earth split open beneath them, and spears of electromagnetic death surged upward, slicing their vessels in half, the aliens realized something terrifying. Humans fight back. Across the globe, from Siberia's ice fields to the Amazon jungle, humans hit back with weapons designed to kill gods. Plasma bombs hijacked from down to carry tech, sound-based disruptors that made matter shake itself apart. Even rail guns strapped onto freight trains, aimed at the skis like slingshots against giants. The aliens had numbers, they had power, but humans had rage, and that made all the difference. By the end of week 2, alien losses had risen to double what they'd predicted. Their scouts reported confusion, panic. It didn't make sense. Humanity should have crumbled. They were primitive, emotion-driven, weak. But there's one thing the Ikari never understood. We weren't just defending our planet, we were avenging it. The skis above Earth were no longer quiet. What once was a serene stretch of blue had turned into a battlefield, and the Ikari, in all their technological glory, found themselves ducking for cover, a concept they hadn't experienced in over 1,000 years. They weren't prepared for it. Their models showed swift victory. Their simulations accounted for every possibility except human madness. Briggs knew that was humanity's edge. In the bowels of an underground base in Alaska, a teenager named Ravi Singh was rewriting Ikari code with nothing but an old laptop and a custom neural interface he'd built out of scrap and spare VR parts. No military training, no clearance, just a brain that thought in lines of logic instead of language. Ravi had intercepted one of the aliens' transmission streams and realized something no one else did. "They talk in harmonics," he told Briggs, hands flying over his keyboard. Not words, not even math. It's like music, a frequency-based encryption loop that changes every time they speak. Briggs didn't understand half of what Ravi was saying, but he trusted it, because that's what leadership looked like now, believing in the people who weren't on anyone's payroll. 2 hours later, they hijacked an Akari command drone and rerouted it into one of their own ships. The explosion could be seen from as far away as Mongolia. The cracks in the alien invasion began to spread. Down in Brazil, guerrilla fighters who used to battle cartels now took down patrols using traps made from jungle vines, animal carcasses, and scavenged tech. In Poland, a group of miners rigged a massive EMP from the ruins of an old steel mill and dropped an entire alien scout division into darkness. The human response wasn't unified, and it wasn't pretty, but it was working, and the Akari were starting to fear us. In orbit, Commander Jalek of the 4th Starboard Legion paced across the glowing floor of his flagship. His face was long and angular, his skin a sleek silver blue reflecting the flickers of panic from his bridge officers. What once was a composed, noble warrior now looked weary, uncertain. "This isn't according to projections," Jalek muttered, reading the new casualty figures. "The human retaliation is disorganized, fragmented, yet effective." One of his aides whispered, "They do not operate under logic. They are emotional, erratic, undisciplined." "Unpredictable," Jalek corrected. He hated the taste of that word. Humans shouldn't have been capable of resisting this long. Every other world fell in days, some in hours. Earth was supposed to be an easy conquest, a test even, yet now they were bleeding. Every battle cost more, every planet fall turned into a nightmare. And they'd barely deployed their real weapons yet. That's what scared Briggs the most. In a makeshift war room beneath what used to be a Denver skyscraper, he stood with a few remaining generals and engineers, staring at a massive holographic map riddled with red and yellow dots. "We've lost a third of the planet," one of the younger officers said grimly. "Our food systems are hanging by a thread, and medical infrastructure is down in over 70% of zones. Sir, we're winning battles, but we're losing the war." Briggs didn't blink. "We've still got one thing they'll never understand." "What's that?" He leaned forward and tapped the center of the map, where a cluster of lights blinked wildly over Eastern Europe. Insanity. Because what no alien fleet could ever comprehend was just how far humans were willing to go when cornered. We burned our own cities to keep enemies from using them. We poisoned rivers the aliens had claimed. We even sacrificed entire squadrons just to take down one enemy ship. It wasn't strategy, it was survival, and it was working. The Akari command began recalling their outer fleets. Reinforcements flooded Earth's orbit, preparing for one final sweep to end the conflict. Their logic told them to finish it now, before the infection of fear spread among their ranks. But Earth had a surprise waiting for them, a weapon so unstable even Earth's own nations had agreed never to use it. Briggs called it the Dust Maker, and it had just come online. The weapon had no official name in the archives. It was buried under layers of black-ink documents filed away in sealed vaults, accessible only to ghosts. Nations had once agreed in hushed rooms that if humanity ever reached the brink, it should remain buried. No activation codes, no manuals, only a warning label burned into the vault's steel. "This device ends everything." But Earth was at the brink, and Briggs didn't believe in sacred lines when the enemy was already burning the world. So they dug it up, a handful of engineers and old-world scientists who remembered its blueprints, only because they had designed it. It took 3 days and the last of Earth's high-density fusion cells to bring it back online. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a laser. It was worse. The Dust Maker was a spatial destabilizer. It didn't explode. It unraveled matter, air, even time itself, bent around its pulse like it couldn't decide if it wanted to exist. It had been built to be a deterrent, not a weapon of use. But now it was the last bullet in Earth's gun. The plan was simple: wait for the Akari to regroup their fleet into a single cluster, overconfident, arrogant, let them try one final planetary purge, and then unleash the Dust Maker dead center. There'd be fallout, there'd be loss. But if it worked, Earth would still have a future. If it failed, well, then everything would die anyway. Back aboard the Akari command vessel, Commander Jalek's fleet had grown into a monstrous armada. Hundreds of ships, arranged in tight formation, their orbits synchronized in flawless military precision, marched forward. His voice echoed through his fleet's neural channels. By the hour's end, the infestation will be cleansed. Fire with full power. Leave nothing breathing. Ships hummed to life, cannons powered up, and the atmosphere thinned across the planet's upper crust as the sky prepared to burn again. But something was off. One of the lead targeting vessels blinked out of existence, not exploded, not destroyed, just gone like it had been wiped from the canvas of reality. A moment later, 3 more disappeared the same way. No signal, no trace. Jalek stood stunned. "What is this?" he barked. A cloaked weapon, a distortion field, had appeared. His aides scrambled to answer, but they couldn't. Nothing in their thousands of years of warfare explained what they were seeing. This wasn't war. This was a racer. From Earth's surface, General Briggs watched the sky with gritted teeth. The launch had been triggered 48 seconds ago. The countdown was over. The weapon had fired. And now the aliens were learning what human desperation looked like at its worst. The dust maker didn't just hit, it sang. A low vibration echoed through the ionosphere, a sound no human could hear, but every Ikari did. It resonated deep inside their bone structures, sending waves of nausea, fear, and disorientation. Then the real effect began. Space itself around their ships began to shimmer, the stars behind them bending unnaturally. The Ikari hulls, designed to withstand the fury of suns, began peeling apart like wet paper, and then they crumbled into ash, into nothing. No fire, no debris, just us falling slowly toward Earth like snow. Jalek's command ship trembled violently, systems failed. His crew screamed across the channel as one ship after another blinked out. The fleet was dying, not in battle, but in silence. This is not possible," Jalek muttered. "They should not possess this kind of—" But his words never finished. His ship split, twisted, and vanished. Down below, the skis cleared. Silence returned. Briggs didn't cheer, he didn't smile. He just sat down on a concrete slab outside the bunker and looked up as ash fell like rain. He whispered, "We didn't win." An aide turned to him, confused. "Sir, we survived, that's all for now." But survival was enough. The fleet was gone, Earth, bruised and broken, was still turning. And from the corners of the world, from caves and bunkers and basements once filled with fear, humanity rose. Smoke still lingered. Cities were still in ruins. But the sky was ours again. The sun rose, quiet, over the ruins of Tokyo, casting a pale gold light across broken glass, collapsed towers, and streets thick with the smell of ash and ozone. The war wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, there was no fire falling from the sky, no alien shadows blotting out the light. People started coming out. At first, just a few, nurses carrying wounded children, clutching dirty dolls, old men limping on crutches, then more, dozens, hundreds of survivors, humans. In every corner of the globe it was the same. From the charred plains of Australia to the flooded remains of New York, the story was repeated over and over. The aliens were gone. But no one felt like celebrating because the cost was too high. Briggs sat alone at a steel desk deep inside the command shelter, looking at the casualty reports. Civilian death count estimated at 3.2 billion, infrastructure damage unrecoverable in more than half the world's surface, global communication fragmented, food and water supplies critical. And worst of all, the dust maker had left a scar, a massive hole in the upper atmosphere where the laws of nature still twisted. Satellites that entered the field disappeared. Pilots who flew too close never returned. Whatever it touched was gone. The Ikari fleet had been turned to dust, but so had a piece of Earth's sky, a silent black void that pulsed like a heartbeat above the Pacific. And there were whispers in the scientific communities that had survived. A theory was gaining traction. The dust maker hadn't just destroyed, it had sent a signal not in sound or data but in energy. A ripple of pure, unnatural force had torn through the galaxy when it fired, and someone or something might have felt it. Briggs closed the report and looked at the lone photo on his desk, his daughter Sarah, killed during the second wave, a civilian, a teacher. He hadn't even had time to bury her. The Ikari had struck her city first. Now, even with the war won, there was no peace in his heart, only a quiet kind of rage, a question that burned inside every survivor. What now? The answer came 3 days later from the sky. It wasn't an attack, no fire, no fleet. Just a single black pod, no larger than a car, that crashed into a field outside what used to be Berlin. Military teams surrounded it in minutes, guns raised, eyes wide. It didn't open for hours, and when it did, what stepped out wasn't what they expected. It was human, or at least it looked human. Tall, pale-skinned, dressed in a shimmering black suit that seemed to shift colors with every blink. Its eyes were too bright, too aware, its smile too calm. I bring greetings from the Coalition of Preservers, it said in perfect English, its voice smooth and unnatural. We detected an illegal use of a Class 9 spatial weapon originating from your planet. We are here to investigate. Briggs was flown in personally. The figure, who identified itself only as Llewellyn, greeted him with a polite nod and a small, too-practiced smile. You have survived an incursion, Llewellyn said. We monitored your resistance, remarkable considering your species' current developmental stage. Briggs narrowed his eyes. You watched. We are not allowed to intervene, only observe until now. Briggs clenched his jaw. You let them slaughter billions. Llewellyn's smile didn't waver. They broke a law. You broke a bigger one. The dust maker should not exist in this quadrant. Its use has consequences beyond your understanding. Briggs stood silent for a moment, then said flatly, You want us to apologize? Ellen shook his head slowly. No, we want to know where you got the weapon. Briggs didn't answer. Didn't have to, Ellen read from his silence. You made it yourselves. His tone shifted, less curiosity, more concern. Primitive species do not build such things without help. Briggs leaned in. Maybe you've all underestimated us. Ellen didn't respond, not for a while. Then he simply said, Then you're more dangerous than we thought. He turned to go but paused before re-entering his ship. This is not the end, General. The Akari were arrogant. They thought you weak, but others will not make that mistake. And with that, the pod lifted into the sky and vanished into the clouds. The warning echoed in Briggs's ears long after he was back in the bunker. Earth had survived the invasion, but now it wasn't just a planet that had fought back. It was a planet that had sent a message to the stars, and the stars were starting to listen. In the aftermath of Ellen's visit, something changed in the air. It wasn't fear. Earth had already been bathed in that. It wasn't relief either, because no one really believed they were safe. What settled across the planet now was anticipation. Sharp and electric, like standing in a thunderstorm and knowing the lightning hadn't struck yet. In the ruins of Moscow, where children played between broken tanks and alien bones, people began talking about Ellen. Some said he was a warning, others said he was the beginning of something bigger. The survivors weren't just rebuilding homes anymore, they were preparing. The world no longer saw itself as a collection of divided nations. It was Earth, and it had enemies out there. Briggs knew it too. He'd seen it in Ellen's eyes, the flicker of unease, whatever that being represented. It didn't expect humans to claw their way out of extinction. But humans didn't win by playing fair, they won by not dying, and that was enough. The next few weeks moved fast. What was left of world governments merged into a shaky, tense alliance called the Earth Continuum. No one liked the name, but it was the only thing they could all agree on besides not dying again. They combined resources, data, even soldiers, anything they had left. But their most important work wasn't military, it was scientific. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, inside what had once been CERN, a new facility was being carved out by hand and machine. They called it the Forge. It was where Earth's smartest survivors, physicists, hackers, even rogue engineers, gathered to figure out exactly what the Dust Maker had done, not just to the Akari fleet, but to reality. Ravi Singh was there, naturally. He was now considered Earth's most dangerous asset, even though he still wore the same hoodie and still lived off protein bars, but inside his mind were equations that didn't belong to Earth anymore. I think we woke something up, he said one night, hunched over a monitor. The universe, it noticed us. A German physicist leaned in. You mean Ellen? No, Ravi said without looking away. I mean the universe, something big, something old. At first, no one believed him. Then the echoes began. Across the globe, strange phenomena started to surface. Machines that powered themselves without energy, voices in data streams that didn't come from Earth, people dreaming of star systems they couldn't name, and in several places, survivors reported brief, flickering visions of ships that weren't there. Yet Earth hadn't just fought off an invasion. It had torn a hole in something ancient. The Dust Maker's pulse had been more than a weapon. It had rattled the cage, and now the universe was stirring. Back in Alaska, Briggs met with an old friend, Dr. Elaine Voss, once a leading astrophysicist, now wrapped in blankets and scars, haunted by the things she'd seen from orbit. They're coming, John, she said, staring out across the frozen horizon. Who? The ones who used to control weapons like the Dust Maker, the ones who made it illegal. Briggs frowned. You think Ellen was just the front? Elaine nodded slowly. The coalition he mentioned, they're not peacekeepers, they're wardens. They didn't save us because they don't care about lives, they care about control. Briggs looked down at his hands. They still shook sometimes, not from fear, but from rage. "So we made too much noise." Elaine gave him a look that chilled him more than the wind outside. "We screamed." He walked back into his command bunker later that night with a new mission. They couldn't wait for the next enemy to come. They had to prepare, learn, adapt, because Earth didn't just need soldiers anymore. It needed guardians. The forge was accelerated. New designs were drawn. Recovered Akari tech was reverse-engineered and fused with human innovation. Weapons that once seemed like science fiction were being assembled in real time. And in orbit, Earth launched its first real attempt at a unified defense platform, Project Sentinel. A ring of satellites and repurposed alien drones, rigged with particle disruptors, EMP nets, and an AI core based on Ravi's cracked Akari language protocols, transmitted one message: Earth isn't easy prey anymore. But even as hope sparked in the ashes deep beneath the forge, Ravi made a discovery that turned his blood to ice. The dust maker hadn't just fired once. It had rippled like a beacon, and something was coming toward it. Something not a courier, not Ellen's coalition, something older than both. Ravi stared at the screen, eyes wide, lips parted slightly, barely breathing. The Forge's AI core, nicknamed Lazarus, was cycling through deep space telemetry, trying to trace the aftershock patterns from the dust maker's activation. But it wasn't what he expected. It wasn't just energy, it was language or something trying to be. Buried in the signal wave, wrapped around the ripples like thorns around a vine, was structure. Frequency intervals repeating at mathematical intervals that shouldn't occur naturally. Code masquerading as static, and the message was pulsing back. "Something's listening," Ravi whispered. Behind him, Dr. Morales, a linguist-turned-decoder from old MIT, leaned in. "Are you saying it's talking to us?" "No," Ravi sat back, rubbing his temple. "I think it's warning us." At the same time, far above Earth's newly repaired orbit, the Sentinel array caught a ghost, a blur. Just for a moment, one of the outer satellites, the Kelvin 9, registered a tear in space, a rupture in the background radiation like claws dragging across silk. No ship, no heat trail, just absence like something was folding in rather than arriving. Command scrambled to get visuals. There were none, and then it vanished. Back on Earth, Briggs was informed immediately. He stood in silence, staring at the report, then muttered, "We just became the flashlight in the dark, and now the monsters are looking back." The Continuum Council convened the next day. Representatives from what was left of the great nations, China, the remnants of the U.S., the African Confederation, the Pacific Alliance, each sent envoys. They didn't argue like they used to. The war had changed them. Pride had a lower price now. Ravi presented his findings. "What we activated," he explained, pulling up a crude model, "wasn't just a weapon, it was a key." "A key to what?" someone asked. "A prison," he replied softly. Gasps, murmurs, he continued. "The dust maker was originally part of a chain reaction weapon designed by an ancient species, older than the Akari, older than even Ellen's coalition. We only had a fragment, but it was enough to rattle the bars." "And now whatever's behind those bars," Briggs added, "knows we're here." One of the delegates, an old Japanese general, folded his arms. "Then we should bury the tech, dismantle it, make Earth small again." But Ravi shook his head. "It's too late for that. We've already made the noise. The galaxy knows we're here. The question now is, do we cower or do we evolve?" Briggs stood beside him. "We don't back down." That night, humanity made its choice. The Forge expanded. Sentinel launched Phase 2, an orbital fleet initiative codenamed Titan. Watch, a new type of ship blending Akari materials with Earth engineering. Small, fast, brutal. They were called Duster. Pilots were recruited, trained in silence, far from the public eye. Volunteers, only survivors, the kind of people who'd already lost everything and had nothing left but the urge to fight. One of them was a girl from Sao Paulo who'd seen her entire family turn to ash in the first wave. Another was a soldier from Johannesburg who'd single-handedly taken down an Akari scout ship with nothing but stolen explosives in spite. These weren't heroes. They were warnings in human form, and they flew under one banner. Let them come. Back beneath the forge, Ravi kept working. The signal was still active, still growing stronger. He traced it farther than he ever thought possible, past the stars humans could see, past where even the Akari dared to go, and he found it. A system where light bent wrong, where suns collapsed into each other like dying lungs, where gravity screamed. The signal was coming from inside that. Briggs, when told, didn't speak for a long time. Then he looked up and said only this, "Prepare a team." "What for?" Ravi asked. Briggs's voice was like steel on concrete. "We're going to knock on the devil's door." The mission was codenamed Project Hades. Its goal wasn't defense. It wasn't diplomacy. It was reconnaissance in hell. A six-person crew, one ship, the Valkyrie one, the first of the Duster fleet with interstellar capabilities, a fusion of Earth's blunt force engineering and the Carrie's sleek spatial fold tech. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't pretty, but it could bend space for 7 seconds at a time, just enough to leap light years and come back in one piece. Maybe Briggs handpicked the crew himself. Captain Naomi Rowe, former Special Forces, survivor of the Osaka incursion, cold-eyed, level-headed, and known for executing orders with surgical precision, even when those orders involved mercy killings. Kai Ghost, Lumen, a cybernetic Exerd pilot who lost half his skull in a raid on a down-to-carry spire. What remained was wrapped in carbon steel and sarcasm. Dr. Jules Nair, biologist and linguist, who claimed to have dreamed of the strange language in the dust maker's signal long before Ravi ever decoded it. Lieutenant Isaiah Cross, artillery specialist and demolitions expert, who laughed when he lit explosives and never looked back when they went off. And finally, Ravi himself, not because he wanted to go, but because he had to. The signal was calling him, literally. He hadn't slept in 5 days before launch. Every time he closed his eyes, the stars whispered. Every time he blinked, he saw the same thing, a world of shattered moons. A sky without light, and something vast wrapped in chains of void. The sixth crew member wasn't human. It was Lazarus, the AI installed into Valkyrie's core. It now spoke with unsettling calm and a voice slightly too human. It had learned emotion from Ravi, adapted sarcasm from Kai, curiosity from Jules, and now it watched them all quietly, carefully. The launch was silent. No crowds, no news, just a ship tearing a hole through space and vanishing into blackness. What greeted them on the other side was wrong. There was no star, just dark matter orbiting nothing. Planets with no rotation, frozen winds circling pits that dropped straight through reality. The ship's instruments jittered, unsure if they were looking at matter or memory. Then they found the source, an object in orbit around a shattered planet. Not a satellite, not a ship, but a monolith, black, endless, floating on an axis that didn't exist. The signal was pouring from it, constant, pulsing like a beacon or a scream. Jules whispered, "It's not transmitting, it's bleeding." Rowe gave the order, "Suit up, approach on foot." Valkyrie's small landing pod detached, sailing down in silence. As they neared the monolith, Lazarus spoke through their helmet comms, "This structure is older than your star. It should not exist in this dimension." Kai muttered, "Cool, so we're officially inside a cosmic mistake." They landed on what used to be the surface of a planet. Now it was little more than broken ground and stuttering gravity fields. Time moved weirdly, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Ravi saw his own breath hang for minutes before vanishing. And then the monolith opened, not like a door, more like a thought, as if reality around it gave permission. Inside was light and memory and pain. The walls weren't made of matter, they were made of moments, time itself frozen and stitched into architecture. They saw visions. Stars dying, species begging, wars fought with silence, machines crucified on black suns. In the center of the monolith floated a seed, black as ink, small but pulsing like a heart. Jules stepped forward. "It's not a signal," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "It's a warning, a message to the jailers, the ones who locked it away." Ravi's voice cracked. "Then why is it still pulsing?" They turned to leave, and the seed opened. A voice, not sound, not words, but meaning flooded into their minds. "Unshackled, released, witness me." Lazarus screamed through every channel, breach, reality, integrity collapsing. The crew barely made it back to the pod as space around the monolith began twisting like it was trying to rewrite itself. A ripple surged through the system, faster than light, faster than thought. "Back aboard Valkyrie," Rowe barked. "Get us the hell out of here," Ravi whispered. "We woke something up." Kai slammed the drive. The stars bent, they jumped. But something came with them, a whisper, a crack in reality, a footprint left behind. Earth had screamed into the void, now the void had whispered back. When Valkyrie 1 emerged back into normal space, orbiting high above Earth, everything was wrong. The sky looked familiar, but the instruments didn't agree. Gravitational pull was off by 0.04%. Atmospheric particles had microscopic distortions in their atomic structure, and Earth's magnetosphere pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Something had followed them through the fold, something that didn't fully exist in their dimension but now had a foothold. Ravi knew it immediately. "We didn't just wake it up," he said in a dry voice. "We invited it." Briggs was already waiting at the forge's re-entry pad. As soon as they stepped out, the silence told them everything. There were no soldiers, no technicians, just empty corridors and a whisper in the air that made the back of your skull itch. "Where is everyone?" Ravi looked around. Briggs appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by 2 Duster sentinels. He looked older, tired. "We evacuated the forge 3 hours ago," he said. "The pulse you triggered, whatever it was, it hit every system." Power surges, static bleeding from speakers. Some people started screaming in languages they didn't speak, others just vanished like smoke. Kai blinked. "Hell is leaking." Lazarus had transferred to the forge's mainframe the moment they docked. It was analyzing everything, sky patterns, electromagnetic shifts, even dreams recorded through neural interfaces, and it confirmed the worst. The monolith wasn't just a beacon. It was a lock, a fail-safe, and now it was open. The thing they had awakened, whatever ancient, malevolent intelligence had been kept in that void system, was not a god. It was a mistake, a forgotten consequence from the beginning of time, a parasite looking for minds to nest in. And it had marked Earth. Already, reports poured in. People in deep REM sleep who never woke up, others who did, screaming and convulsing until their eyes turned black and their voices echoed in multiple tones. Machines that refused to shut down, muttering lines of impossible code, building strange geometric shapes out of whatever materials were nearby. Entire towns had gone dark. Something was growing and it was learning. Briggs called an emergency command council. There was only one option left. Ravi stood in the center of the room, eyes red from lack of sleep. "We need to send it back, seal the door permanently." "How?" someone asked. "We rebuild the dust maker." A ripple of fear hit the room. "You want to use the same thing that opened the gate?" asked Jules, stunned. "No," Ravi said. "I want to complete it." He explained, the dust maker they used was only a piece, a half-weapon designed to collapse enemy fleets with spatial resonance. But its original purpose, before it was ever fragmented, was to destroy realities, to delete spaces from the cosmic fabric entirely, not kill, not damage, but erase. If they finished the design, rebuilt the full dust maker, and used it on the monolith's echo signature, they might be able to sever Earth from the infection. Cut the connection before it fully manifested. "But it'll cost everything," Ravi added, "the forge, the system, the people nearby. It'll burn our orbit clean." Briggs didn't hesitate. "Do it." It took 36 hours. Every Duster ship fed its energy core into the reconstruction. Lazarus reprogrammed the final detonation code, installing it into a single-use satellite they named Prometheus. Valkyrie 1 flew one final time into the upper atmosphere, dragging Prometheus behind it. Ravi was aboard. He refused to let anyone else be the one to press the button. As he watched the clouds part and saw Earth beneath him, blue, cracked, scarred, beautiful, he whispered into the comms, "If this works, forget us. Don't build again. Don't scream into the dark. Just live." Then he pushed the button. Prometheus ignited. The sky turned white. Everything went still. 10 years later, the forge is gone. The orbital field is dead, but Earth survived. Barely. No more alien tech, no more signals, no more Lazarus.